I have. I was taught to hurt, and I learned. Men and boys were my teachers. Every boy that learned to hurt like I did has a story of why, where, and for what purpose we learned to hurt. All of these stories are important. My story is important, but not right now. What's important right now is to find our voice and to speak up. I have not respected no. No has meant try again. Be funnier, be stronger, be more, be less, drink more, use drugs. I was taught never take no for an answer. I have manipulated, pretended, promised, and I've been a predator. It is well past time for us men to join women and find our voices and speak up. I have seen my sister, members of my family, countless friends, colleagues, so many other women that I don't know speak up about their experiences on social media with the hashtag #MeToo. From men, crickets, nothing. I've started this note a bunch of times over the past days, and shame got in the way of finishing it. A voice inside me says, "Don't post this. You're a good guy. You work hard to help other people. Nobody wants to hear you talk. Don't be that guy. I can't be the person I want to be in the world today and stay quiet. I'm a father. I have a son." I believe this is how we teach the next generation of men. If you're my friend, then I urge you to find your voice. Own your part, as small or as large, and begin a healing of our gender. Let's begin to speak in truths.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being a warrior dad. Thank you for the light and the consciousness and the mindfulness and the awareness that you bring to MomTalk, to you guys, to your family, to my family, and to our community. I'm deeply, deeply touched and feeling gratitude right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow, what courage. You're right. Not too many men find courage, or not too many dads find courage, or not too many politicians find courage to step up and say, "I have." But you did, and it starts with you, and it starts with you, and it starts with us. And so I think that with the Thanksgiving season coming up and this sort of intentional, conscious living of gratitude and integrating gratitude into our lives, what better ways to thank the men, the he's for she's, the men who are standing up, who are resisting, who are voicing their opinions, who are saying that enough is enough. And it's time to cultivate equity. It's time to cultivate equanimity. It's time to say that 50-50 matters, and that you, as the dad or the husband or the boss or the person who's working with your opposite gender colleague, friend, sister, daughter, are behind her. You stand beside her, you are with her, and you empower her. So it is quite special. It's a special Mom Talk, and I'm so honored to have Koorosh Rassekh, who is the founder of EVO Wellness and Health Center. It is a center that is devoted to treating and helping those who struggle with addiction from a very new and evolutionary perspective of integrating consciousness and mindfulness and well-being in understanding addiction and helping those recover from addiction. And so it is my pleasure to open up this conversation about perhaps how gender inequality or lack of equanimity in relationships at home with husbands and wives, with bosses and colleagues and so forth, at the workplace, at schools, amongst kids, how does that contribute to preventing a future that does not have to deal with #MeToo and does not have to deal with #IHave? Koorosh, welcome to Mom Talk.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. What inspired you? I want to get into your mindset, and as a father, as a parent, as a husband, as a brother. I mean, that was so beautifully written, and as you were reading it, after reading it for, I don't know, like 40 times, I am still moved and inspired and touched. So tell us about that.
Thank you. It's interesting to check in with myself as I was reading that and to see that inner turmoil that just comes up, and all of it in service of just shutting me down, silencing, because the shame is so strong. When I believe this was in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein news break and women coming out and the entertainment industry being exposed for what I think everybody has known it does to women. And the Me Too movement began, and I just started reading post after post after post of women sharing detailed accounts, and there was a common thread. It wasn't these, there was certainly plenty of events where women were attacked, they were abused, but it was more subtle, and women speaking about family members, friends, best friends. I think some of the stories that most stuck with me were women talking about in their entire orbit of men, there wasn't a single man that they could really trust. And it had to do with men being in contact with our own behavior. And I think for me, the icing on the cake was the last straw was my sister's post. And that hit home in a way. And I wonder, why did I need that? But that was it, and I just felt like I needed to speak up, to own my history. I've been aware of it. I'm a therapist. And part of my work is around affirmative and social justice and feminism. And so I've been aware of it, but it was time for me to go public. There were so many men that were posting congratulatory comments on women's posts, sort of encouraging bravery and lamenting loss and sorrow. And I thought, this post just said that none of the men I know are safe. And then there's like 30 men that just posted saying, that was really incredible what you just did. And I thought there's a part of this that's missing. It's us to step up and say, we're the problem. And not to say that we're evil, we do bad things, but that we learned this. This is part of patriarchy, and at least the patriarchy that we live in, where we are taught how to treat women. And unless we are specifically taught against that primary story by our family or by a community, and then the more pain we have, the more these things manifest, and to like these exaggerated things we see in the more powerful men in the media today, to the more silenced voices that happen every day in every office, in every home, on every college campus, in every high school.
So would you say that then it is our social responsibility as parents to cultivate character, sexual integrity, and to focus on equanimity within the family structure, that it starts at home?
Yeah, it starts at home. It starts with parents beginning to look in the mirror themselves, and looking at, and specifically from my perspective, it's about time for men to join this. I think women, in many ways, working in addiction treatment, there's a disproportionate number of women who have had sexual trauma in addiction treatment. There are some very well established, some leaders in the addiction treatment field who have treated tens of thousands of people, who will say that 100% of the women that they've worked with have suffered sexual abuse, objectification in one way or another. My own experiences as a clinician is similar. So there's a real consequence to this. This is a thing that's happening, and we are a part of it. So it's about, and women have in so many ways been saying that this is happening, whether it's a little girl who stops smiling or becomes aggressive or begins to act out sexually. This change in behavior goes from being a really great student to not such a great student. And we don't see that. We don't see that pain. We don't see the transition and wonder why, what happened. Whether it's case after case after case of women speaking up about sexual abuse, and there being no or just a token punishment. And I'm not a fan of punishment, but at least in the system that we have, it's a way of acknowledging, validating that this thing happened and it had consequences. I mean, I was also struck, maybe my post started some time ago, when that Stanford swimmer sexually assaulted a woman, and this is like what you would call traditional, textbook sexual assault, seen by two people that stopped the assault. And the judge gave him a light sentence saying that he's worried about the future of this young man. And I thought, what about the future of this young woman? So,
very important, and good point that it takes social sort of change and intent, I think, and leadership, perhaps. I mean, we see Roy Moore, what's happening with Roy Moore and Al Frankel, and, from a political stance, as well as an educational stance, as well as home and school connection. I think we're all now awakened to this issue, like you noted, and also self-reflecting, on our personal experiences, as well as how we contribute to this problem. I think in my professional practice, I've seen sort of peer pressure play a significant role in this. And so how do we teach our teenagers and our youngsters and our little ones to be critical thinkers and not to fall into the trap of peer pressure sometimes? I mean, this morning, I had to sort of challenge my son, who made a somewhat aggressive comment about another friend at school, because he was in a group, in a situation where they kind of teased this kid who's not very athletic, and he thought that was funny. And so he was just reliving that scenario, the story, the narrative, at home with now our daughters, the two other ones, and laughing about it. And so I kind of had to tune in, and I said, "What did you say?" And he said, "Well, so-and-so said that so-and-so got the red team." So at school, they have red is the best team, and then white and blue. So these sports and competition. And so this student who's not very athletic, this kid said, "Well, you got the red team," in a teasing way, teasing the child, the student. And the group thought it was funny. right? And so he fell into that groupthink, and he thought it was funny, and he was giggling about it, and he was telling now, sharing this story, and I said, no, like, what are you saying? Like, if you were this kid, how would you feel if they talked about you? So, and as soon as you bring empathy into, I think, the situation, which is the power of situation. I think with sexual assault or making those sexual comments or objectifying or sexualizing a beautiful girl or a beautiful teenager, there is that danger. It's very seductive. There's a danger for falling into this trap. And sometimes we think it's funny, and sometimes even I've seen girls who like it and think it's funny. Some of those. So I think we have to step up and be conscious about the intent of communication, and when it is aggressive, when it's intentionally an aggressive act or comment or behavior, to take responsibility and to stand up for the person who's at the receiving end of the aggression. And so, I did this morning. I stood up for this student, and my son got it, and he really felt sorry, and I said, well, now what will you do in the future? And I think you have to just repeat those scenarios 10,000 times for the little ones to then start to understand why they need to stand up and not be a victim of groupthink or peer pressure, or be trapped in when they're in situations where perhaps a female or a male is sexualized in that way, in an aggressive way, intentionally aggressive way. And there are other ways, I think, in the sexual development stage of children that they have fun with it, right? They just make comments, and it's okay because we're sexual beings.
Sure.
And it's okay. But if someone is getting hurt, and if their intent is to hurt, then in those situations, I think the boundaries have to be really clear, and we have to teach our kids to be responsible. Put yourself in their shoes. Be them. Wear them. How does it feel? Okay? And I think that's a start.
Yeah, exactly. It's that perspective taking, right? So the empathy is the product of being able to take the perspective. And that's one of the things that is shocking to me when I'm working with people, particularly men. After I made that post, I was the fortunate recipient of about a half a dozen calls from really great friends I haven't seen in a long time who saw the post and felt compelled to give me a call, all men. And every single one of them came to my defense, right? And to say, oh, well, you weren't that bad, and even sort of said, oh, you're sort of grandstanding, right? This is, we get it. This is your therapist, and you're trying to make a thing. And it really, as I talked to them, I was like, well, what do you think when we did this thing, or when we were out and we were drinking or whatever, and we just thought, I'm going to whistle, or I'm going to say something, or my intention is to connect with this person for my own benefit tonight. What do you think they felt? And it's like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? They like it. I'm like, well, that's not what we're hearing. What if they didn't like it? And that was such an uncomfortable place to go in that conversation. I felt as though on that phone call I was betraying a friendship. Here they are reaching out to me, and we're supposed to connect and do this whole thing. And by just asking us to wonder, what if what we think is wrong? And it's not like we're making a stretch. Every woman we know is saying, you're wrong, right? And still, it's really hard for us. Because I think as boys, we are so deeply socialized. This peer pressure, this parental pressure, daddy's friends, male role models, all of these things that suggest this is the way. This is the way. If you want to, and life is hard. Being a kid is hard. Being a teenager is ridiculous. For everybody, parents especially. But actually, that's not true. For adolescents, it's super difficult. And if we overcome that internal voice that says, this is not cool, you're hurting somebody. If we're able to squash that and just sort of buy in, either by silence or by becoming complicit, life gets a little bit easier. We connect with that primary story, that stream that we get to swim with, rather than swim against. But that has really significant negative consequences all around. It's not just women. Men also suffer in addiction and in a lot of other ways, but mostly in aloneness, loneliness. I know that this conversation we're having is in the context of sort of heteronormative life, but within that context of heteronormative life, in the pursuit of partnership and relationship and family, here we are, and we have this piece where our partners, our wives, our life partners, whatever we want to call them, and us have this totally divergent experience around the impact of patriarchy, being a man, on women. And that's intense.
Yeah. I gotta let that sink in. That was beautiful. Just so well put. And it's true. And if we're going to evolve and thrive and grow together as a family, as husband and wife or partners, and with our children and our families, we got to have awareness of those elements, those very key elements, in what it takes to holistically experience thriving and growth at its ultimate, like infinite potential in that field of consciousness. What are the key elements? And when you really sit with that, I think there is an intrapsychic and there is an interpersonal responsibility in cultivating peace learning and cultivating compassion and cultivating self-compassion and having high standards. I think having high expectations and not letting those subtle, not so right interpersonal neurobiological exchanges just go. I think to wonder, to hold ourselves responsible in those wanderings, and to have this wanderlust being and consciousness, and hold each other as well as ourselves accountable to meet those high expectations. I know I do. I know I try to. And it's hard because you're right. There is this epigenetic, this historical sort of baggage. I see it in my own relationship. There's all this like masculinity and program conditioned sort of ways of doing things that we're sort of growing with. And unless we take a pause and take a moment to reflect and say, okay, well, what kind of dimensions can we work with or, change around and be okay with, still within our sweet spot, sort of family spot, peace learning spot, but that we can thrive and evolve and become better beings within our family systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's... And it starts with compassion, I believe.
Yes, I do too.
These things are in the very air we breathe, much like racism or biases against cultures. All of these things that are there, it's there. It's all over the media. It's all over TV and newspapers. It is in our social systems, in our professional systems. And so we as boys grow up within this, right? And we're infected by it. And I think the only way to begin to heal it is through the lens of compassion, and specifically self-compassion. You have to, and I'm not suggesting that there are certainly experiences in my life that that I wish never happened. And they're not okay, nor are they ever going to be okay. That's just the bottom line. But as long as I can't get beyond the wrong, it's hard for me to get to the next step and say, how do I not do that again? Right? It's to have the self-compassion to say, that happened. Those things happened. And now, how do I not do that? And how do I make an amends for that in the way that I live, in the way that I pass it on to my kid? Because it is hard. It's really hard to face yourself in the mirror and to go, wow. And I'm not talking about really awful, bad things that perpetrators like we're hearing about and the news have done. We're talking about the pain, the harm that's done by people who themselves would say, I'm a nice person. I'm a nice man. And most people around them would say, he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. And this is still part of the fabric of what it means to be a man. And of course, there are exceptions to everything.
And so that brings up sort of this next topic of if we're going to be that honest and vulnerable with ourselves and unpacking that sort of our deepest parts of our vulnerable self, then the resilience that comes from that, the growth that comes from that, the experiences of growth that we have are infinite. So being vulnerable in those spaces is going to cultivate empathy, is going to put you in a situation where, yes, I mean, just sitting next to you here and listening to you as a male colleague is so powerful. There's so much empathy. I feel connected. I feel like you're honest. You're being vulnerable. And that type of vulnerability, not only internally, like you say, with self-compassion, allows growth and thriving and evolution of itself, but also helps with your friends and your colleagues and your surrounding relationships. And so it's taking a risk. Yes, it takes courage. It's not easy because, like you say, many of these men are perfect, and you look at them and like, oh, he's a good guy, you know, he's a good guy, he's a nice guy. But being honest and being vulnerable and being in a place where you kind of reevaluate the role of power. I know for many men and relationships, you know, money and having power with money and having sort of being the head of the family, the godfather of the family, those are real issues. And it taps right into the core of this place where you're being honest and vulnerable with yourself and you know, challenging it. And we're not saying, you know, change your life, just take a vulnerable step towards growth and helping with the cultivation of peace and, you know, happiness. Because guess what? If you bring equity and equanimity and you empower girls and women in your family, you're going to have a thriving society. They say, you know, look at how the society is treating their women and their children. And in fact, I have to say, one of my favorite sort of new perspectives in getting to know people and making friends and developing friendship and relationships is watching that parent, that caregiver in relation to their children and how they, you know, have cultivated a relationship with their child. And it really is the best, I think, not the best, but one of my favorites, one of my favorites in getting to know someone and getting to know how they relate to the world.
Yeah. And I also want to speak up for what I believe around men. I think all men, all the time, wherever we are, we're trying. Right? We are trying. That voice is in there, as faint as deep as it might be, that says, this doesn't feel good. There's something about this, is particularly the lion's share of men who do fall into the category of nice guys, people who are trying to live valued, respectful lives, to try to make this world better for their kids, to leave it a little bit better, right? So I do think that is happening. And within that, my suggestion is to just allow that inner voice to gain power, just to listen to it, and run some experiments. Find a woman who you trust and who feels really, really safe, and ask them if they would share with you how you might have objectified them, or how some of the things that you may not be aware of. Now, I want to be careful not to make it a woman's job to help men figure it out. But if you can't do it internally, if you can't sit there and figure it out on your own, maybe to sit there and allow somebody to say, by the way, you do this. You may not notice it, but your eyes, don't ever miss this, right? It's eye-opening for us to become more familiar with the fact that women have noticed that every single magazine you have has certain similar images of women on them, and you just think they're amazing, and what that might mean to women. And not all women are going to respond in the same way, of course.
Can I share?
Oh, sure.
So years ago, Koorosh and I, we used to play poker together with a big group of friends, a friendly game of poker. And I have to say, a couple of times when I was playing good, you know, and I think
That's right.
sometimes I was maybe there were maybe a couple of girls, women who played, and so I just felt like, you know, the comments were coming from a place of, oh, well, you play good for a girl,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And I remember thinking, well, ooh, like that didn't feel good. And what if like there were more, you know, women players and playing at the table, and the tables were turned around. You know, just having that empathetic perspective on it. And but yeah, that happens. I mean, it happens everywhere.
It happens.
Yeah.
I was there, and I can share that I don't remember specific comments,
Yeah.
but I can speak with you about the me that was there,
Yeah.
that would connect with that idea of, yeah, we're sort of tolerating because she really wants to play. And the fact is that you're good at the game, better than a lot of us at the table. So there's certainly nothing around skill or anything like that that would make it non-belonging. And it's a challenging place, and we're competing and all of those things. And the quickness that I could see myself connecting with that belittling of the female that I wouldn't think about the same way. You know, you're a jerk for beating my better hand to a guy. But if you were to be in that hand, it would be like women. Of course, a woman. Like that thought was there in me. Now, I don't know about everybody else.
Yeah.
But I don't think I was born with that thought. Like, that's not a gene. I'm pretty sure. And I have some knowledge around that area. So where did that come from? I certainly don't ever remember anybody sitting me down and saying, now, by the way, women are really great in all of these, but just don't do the poker thing, right? I don't remember that. And when I do speak with men who are challenging themselves to sort of look in and to wonder about how did we become who we are, we all sort of end up with this, wow, it's just so amorphous. It's so all-encompassing. And then depending on our individual experiences and family and spirituality and community and how we sort of have resiliences and vulnerabilities, we find where we end up. But I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
it reminds me.
And also it goes back to, because I was raised in a family that there was a lot of equanimity, just practiced, deeply rooted into our family systems, that I wouldn't take it too harshly. Like I wasn't bothered by it. It was just a thought, and it was just a wondering that came to me. But I can see, for someone who has more sensitivity or more vulnerability, how the reaction could be a little harsher experienced internally. Yeah. And so how they deal with that pain, you know, when they realize, or it reminds them of how mom and dad used to interact, and, you know, dad was not fair towards mom, or belittled mom because she wasn't smart enough, because she wasn't making enough money, because she wasn't whatever, you know, fill in the blank is. And so just having that awareness when we are in social groups and social situations, and I think coming from a place of consciousness where we're mindful about it, and if we see an opportunity to step in and step up and perhaps come alongside someone who is feeling vulnerable, to take that risk and to do it. Because it is easier, it's more convenient to just be part of the group and the peers, and, you know, just be with your peers and your buddies and laugh it off. But it is more difficult and more valuable, I believe, to take a risk, have courage, and to stand up. And that standing up is going to bring social change and justice. I promise you, if we all did that in our daily living and stood up once in a day for someone who's you know, at the receiving end of this, we're going to decrease the abuse, and we're going to decrease people being victims of this.
Absolutely, and that's important. And this is not without its consequence, right? So there are, and I'll share a personal experience. So one of the first areas in which I began to connect with these sorts of internal ideas is when I was training to become a therapist, and I got a traineeship at the LA Gay and Lesbian Center, and in that experience I really connected with how these same ideas exist around the LGBTQ community, and for most men, me specifically, around equating descriptive words for the gay community as inferior ways of being. It's just what you don't want to be. If you fail at something, you are called they're either feminine names or they're gay words that are used. And really and here I am sort of going, well, this isn't cool. Suicide rates, addiction rates, violence rates. I mean, everything you can imagine is escalated in this population, and I'm trying to be a therapist and I'm trying to help. So I really just couldn't. And part of the affirmative therapy that I was training in said that you can't just sit with a client and see the client and to connect and to help if you're not actively doing the work in the rest of your life. And so I remember the first few times where I was at lunch with friends, and I had this sort of group of friends that we usually did lunch, and somebody said something that had a homosexual negative comment in it. And I remember that emotion that welled up inside of me. I was like, well, here you go. What are you going to do? Are you going to say something? And I said, yeah, I have to. And I did. And as that voice inside of me suggested, my experience was being shamed for it. Oh, come on. Oh, you're just being sent. Oh, now you're, okay, yeah, you're working at the Gay and Lesbian Center. So now this, that, da. And it was that pushback that said, this is what we're going to do. What are you going to do about it, right? And actually, it was the beginning of the end of that sort of part of my life. Some of the people in that community are now much better, closer friends because we've connected in a deeper way to go, yeah, well, we did this. I harmed gay men by perpetuating, by saying the jokes, by doing all of that. Others I've lost touch with because they just sort of couldn't meet me there, and it just became, they didn't want to be around me, and I didn't want to be around them. And that's a loss. It was sad. I enjoyed that part of my life. But when I do the math, at the end of the day, it's like, well, no, this is the way I want to live. This way of living creates less pain in the world around me and less pain in the world within me. Because at the end of the day, you can't escape the reality that when we hurt somebody, we hurt. Often not as much as they do, but it's there. And it's like, okay, well, what do I want to do? That applies to gender issues. When we sit around and when men do begin to speak up, you will be met with internal and external pushback that says, come on, dude. I've had to unfriend some people on Facebook who just couldn't stop attacking me because of that post that I made. And it's like, okay, well, goodbye. But at the end of the day, I think it's a better way of being. And every woman I know is in pain because of the kind of behaviors that we men engage in. So,
Wow. Beautiful mom talk, guys. This is Cultivation of Peace Learning right here. Hearing from Koorosh Rassekh, therapist, counselor at EVO Health and Wellness Center. And his focus is on conscious well-being and consciousness and health, and how to help those who are suffering, who are in pain, body pain, emotional pain. And he's devoted his life to helping families and teenagers, especially his favorite population, to thrive and to experience happiness and joy, and to learn how to sit and be with their pain. Today we're talking about a very personal pain to him, and we opened up the show with hashtag I have, which was his way of stepping up and raising consciousness and evolving in the community of women who are hashtagging #MeToo, which I shared personally how therapeutic and healing it was for me as a woman, as a human being, as a therapist, and I think this is conscious media at its best, bringing voices and those individuals who shed a little more light on raising awareness regarding conscious living. And so Koorosh not only practices conscious living, he is conscious, and he's a parent who practices conscious parenting on a daily basis. So Koorosh, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your parenting experiences. You know, this is Mom Talk. We do talk to parents and families. Your parenting experience with Cyrus. And you know, I have a Cyrus too. And so what do you find most joyful about parenting?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. It's nice to connect with all of what comes up. It's just I don't know if I can explain it. It's just all of it, right? This little being that is so vulnerable, but yet so strong, and is growing into this person, and to watch him come out and just right, you know, and then to go into he's 4, so he's starting to walk again, right? So they start to walk, and then he just ran for a year and a half, and now he's still mostly running, but he does walk a little bit now, and to see these changes, and to see him, one of my favorite things, I have to tell you, is his negotiation. He is so great. So he starts like way over here to get what he wants over here, you know? And often it starts with, I know that we're not going to do that. I know that. And then, you know, and then just watching him go through this whole process, it's just wonderful.
They are very clever in negotiating, right?
Yeah.
I can attest to that. It is beautiful. I think I've watched, or, you know, on social media with some of your posts or photos, and your family thriving and growing. I've watched how it seems like you allow him to just be. You know, I see some photos where he's just like free play, and he's having fun, and he's just being. And I think in that sort of conscious living space, it's really important to remind ourselves, as well as you viewers and those who like conscious living and conscious parenting, that finding your sweet spot, your sweet zone of freedom, and allowing children to just be. And like Dr. Shefali says, you know, we're here to learn. You know, they're here to teach us. So if we can just step back, step away, and as a Persian sort of cultural heritage kind of type of parent, sometimes it's hard, because I think we're hardwired to want to protect and immediately go to that place where we're, you know, trying to save and protect them. And that's okay. I think that's part of our being. I think any parent has that instinct. But maybe as Persians, we have a little bit more, no? Because our parents were very overprotective. I remember as an immigrant, you know, they were...
Absolutely. I think and I think the immigrant experience, actually, one of the ways that we soothe is by sort of implementing systems. So I think collectively, we probably have shifted more towards that. And another way that we attend to the difficulties of being an immigrant population, and an unwanted immigrant population at that. You know, we didn't come here and people say, oh, you have such a cute accent, right? That happens to the British and the Australians.
Or the Italians.
Or the Italians, right? That is so amazing. I mean, objectifying people for that part too, but is to then go into the pursuit of success and education. And so I think per capita we have more education, more success, all of those things that come with that. But yeah, and it's so hard because I tend to go that way too. I'm an instructions follower kind of guy. Like I won't follow the instructions, but I need to know they're there, right? That kind of thing. And you know, just as an example, spent the better part of the last weekend doing crafts with Cyrus, and noticing sometime late Sunday that, oh, this is great. I just sort of spent 2 days with him, and it was great, and I think it was good parenting, but watching how I'm falling into this, of following instructions, teaching him how to build a certain thing. So of course then I'm in the car with him trying to have a conversation about, there's 2 ways to do crafts. You can make things based on instructions and a picture, or you can just make things the way you want to make it, which is my feeble way.
Like what we do here at MomTalk, right? Just make it.
But it's so easy for me, and Christy, my wife, is just so much better than I am. That it just allowing him to just play, and often that means overcoming that, both my own internal instinct to say, "I'll teach you how to do it," and color in the lines. This is how you draw a dog, versus letting him draw his own version of a dog. And then, of course, his own pushback, too. I have to remember he's a 4-year-old that still lives in this world. I mean, we choose a school according to our values, and that's what I would recommend, is find schools that meet your values, that are affordable and all of those things, but more importantly, that are culturally aligned with who you are as a family and a community. But even those schools, they're in this world. They're in the world that says, do things this way, we'll tell you how to do it, there's a right and wrong to everything, which really stifles creativity. So that's how I squashed my son's creativity this weekend doing crafts with him.
But with awareness and consciousness,
of
and having those
and
dialogues.
compassion.
And compassion.
Right?
And compassion. I love it. Well, it's been a great Mom Talk. Koorosh, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and consciousness and just a fun, uplifting conversation to come alongside all of you, #MeToos, who are hurting or in pain, but are hopeful because of men like Koorosh Rassekh, #IHave. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your presence here on MomTalk. I love you, and keep watching. We're in it to win it. Peace Learning Community. Bye.